Deho stood at the entrance of the Galactic Institute and felt very small. The station was massive, bigger than anything he had ever seen back on Earth. It floated in space above a planet called Telix Prime, and through the transparent walls he could see stars everywhere. The hallways were huge because they needed to fit creatures of all sizes. Some aliens were as small as cats, while others were tall as elephants. He carried his bag over his shoulder and checked his data pad again. Xenobiology Lab, Section 7, Level 12. He was already 10 minutes late. The station was so confusing, with corridors that curved in strange ways and gravity that shifted depending on which section you walked through. Humans were new to all of this. Earth had only joined the Galactic Coalition 6 months ago, and Deho was one of the first students they sent to study. The lab doors opened with a soft hiss. Inside, the room was enormous, with rows of seats arranged in a circle around a central platform. 47 pairs of eyes turned to look at him. Well, not exactly pairs. Some aliens had 4 eyes, some had 6, and one creature seemed to be made entirely of floating gas inside a containment suit, so Deho could not tell if it even had eyes. Professor Vrelt stood at the center. He was an insectoid alien, about 7 feet tall with 4 arms and compound eyes that glittered like black diamonds. His chitinous exoskeleton was dark green and made clicking sounds when he moved. He stopped talking and stared at Deho. "You are late," Professor Vrelt said. His voice came through a translator device, but Deho could still hear the clicking underneath. "Sorry, Professor. I got lost in Section 9. "Humans," Vrelt said, and several students made sounds that might have been laughter. "Take a seat in the back. Try not to disrupt my class again." Deho walked up the stairs, feeling every alien eye following him. He found an empty seat in the last row and sat down quickly. The chair was too big for him, designed for someone much larger. His feet barely touched the floor. Next to him, another human sat watching the professor. She glanced at Deho and gave him a small smile. She had short black hair and looked a few years older than him. She leaned over and whispered, "I'm Myung. You must be the new exchange student." "Deho," he whispered back. "How did you know?" "You're the 3rd human in this program." "Not hard to figure out." She pointed to a young man sitting 3 rows down. "That's Taman. He transferred from the military academy last month." "How long have you been here?" "A year. My mother is a diplomat, so I grew up partially off-world. Makes it easier to adapt." Professor Vrelt's voice cut through their conversation. "Miss Myung, if you are finished socializing, perhaps you can answer my question. What is the primary difference between a predator from a death world and one from a standard evolutionary environment?" Myung stood up smoothly. Death world predators evolve extreme physical adaptations. Armor plating, venomous attacks, enhanced senses. Standard environment predators rely more on pack behavior and intelligence. Correct. Sit down. Vrelt's compound eyes fixed on Deho. "And where would you classify Earth, Mr. Deho?" Deho stood up slowly. He felt his face getting hot. "Earth is classified as a garden world, sir. Moderate climate, stable ecosystems, relatively mild predators." "Relatively mild," Vrelt repeated, and this time the laughter from the other students was clear. "Yes, your planet's most dangerous predator was an animal you called a tiger. Impressive by your standards, I am sure. On my homeworld, tigers would be considered small prey animals." Deho sat down, his jaw tight. Myung touched his arm gently. "Ignore him," she whispered. "He treats all humans like this. Why? Because he thinks we're weak. Our world did not have the pressures that most coalition worlds had. We did not evolve armor or poison or natural weapons. To him, that makes us inferior." Deho watched as the professor continued his lecture. He talked about various death worlds and the creatures that came from them. There was a planet where the gravity was so strong that every animal had reinforced skeletal structures. Another world was so toxic that its predators could breathe fire that was actually acidic vapor. Every example made the other students nod with understanding. They came from places like that. They understood survival through physical power. The class went on for 2 hours. Deho took notes, but his mind kept wandering. He looked at the other students. There was Kess, a reptilian alien with scales that changed color when he talked. His family was wealthy, and he sat in the front row asking questions that sounded more like showing off than actual curiosity. There was Thum, the gaseous being in the containment suit, who seemed friendly enough and had waved at Deho earlier. When the class finally ended, students began filing out. Deho gathered his things slowly. Myung waited for him. "First day is always rough," she said. It gets better, does it? Not really, Taman said, joining them. He was shorter than Deho but had broader shoulders and moved like someone with military training. But you learn to deal with it. I'm Taman. Deho. They shook hands in the human way, which felt strange to do in a place where most beings did not even have hands. Word of advice, Taman said as they walked toward the exit. The practical exams are brutal. They test us on handling live specimens from death worlds. Last month, Myung had to enter a sealed room with a Krellian spine beast. Those things can shoot poisoned barbs from 30 feet away. How did you pass? Deho asked Myung. I watched its breathing pattern and moved when it exhaled. Humans are good at pattern recognition. The aliens have natural defenses, so they do not need to think as much. We have to be smarter. They reached the cafeteria level where students were gathering for the evening meal. The food dispensers could create meals for dozens of different species, each with their own nutritional needs. Deho ordered something that looked like rice and vegetables, though he could not be entirely sure. They sat at a table near the window. Outside, the stars stretched forever. So why did you come here? Myung asked. You could have studied xenobiology on Earth. I wanted to see what was out here, Deho said. My whole life we thought we were alone. Then 6 months ago we find out there are thousands of intelligent species, and we are one of the newest. I wanted to be part of that. Brave, Taman said. Or crazy. Maybe both, Deho admitted. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then Myung's datapad beeped. She checked it and frowned. There is an announcement from Professor Vrelt. What does it say? Taman asked. She read aloud. Special practical examination in 3 days. Students will participate in apex predator psychology study using a live specimen. Attendance is mandatory. Safety protocols will be in place. Deho felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of specimen? It does not say. Myung looked worried. But if Vrelt is calling it special, it means it is something dangerous. Something he thinks will prove his point about Death World superiority. Taman leaned back in his chair. Great, just great. I left the military academy to avoid life-threatening situations, and here I am anyway. Can we refuse? Deho asked. No, Myung said quietly. If we refuse, we fail the course. And if we fail, Earth loses credibility in the coalition. They are already looking for reasons to dismiss us as primitive. We have to pass. Deho looked out at the stars again. Somewhere out there was Earth, a tiny blue dot in an ocean of space. He thought about home, about the small apartment where he grew up, about his family who was so proud when he got accepted to the Galactic Institute. Then we will pass, he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. The cafeteria buzzed with alien conversations in 100 different languages. The translator in Deho's ear turned it all into a low murmur. He watched Kes and his friends at another table, laughing about something. They looked excited about the upcoming exam, not worried. They do not understand fear the way we do, Myung said, following his gaze. Most of them come from worlds where fear was a luxury. You either fought or died. There was no middle ground. What about us? Deho asked. We come from a world where we learned to think our way out of danger, where we domesticated wolves and turned them into dogs, where we invented tools because we did not have claws. She smiled a little. We are not weak, Deho. We are just different. And sometimes different is better. 3 days, Deho thought. 3 days until they found out just how different they really were. The transport ship arrived early in the morning. Deho stood with the other students in the observation deck above the xenobiology lab and watched as station workers guided the massive container through the cargo bay doors. The container was made of reinforced durasteel, the same material they used for ship hulls. Whatever was inside needed serious containment. Professor Vrelt stood at the front of the observation deck, his forearms crossed in what might have been satisfaction. Class, today you will witness a true apex predator. This specimen comes from Gorath 7, a death world where the gravity is 3 times Earth standard. The atmosphere is toxic to most coalition species, and every creature on the surface is either a hunter or prey. There is no in-between. Kes leaned forward in his seat, his scales shifting to an excited orange color. Is it a Rathcore, Professor? Very good, Kes. Yes, it is a Rathcore. One of the finest predators in the known galaxy. Deho felt Myung tense beside him. I have read about them, she whispered. They are not just strong. They are smart. Below them, the workers used mechanical arms to move the container into the center of the lab. The container was easily 20 feet long and 10 feet high. Through small viewing ports, Daeho could see movement inside, but the lighting was too dim to make out details. Professor Vrelt continued his lecture. Rathgors hunt in packs on their homeworld. They have 6 eyes that can see in multiple spectrums, including infrared. Their scales are nearly impenetrable to natural weapons. They can run at speeds up to 60 miles per hour, and their bite force is strong enough to crush durasteel. How intelligent are they? Thum asked, his gaseous form swirling inside his suit with what looked like curiosity. Roughly canine level, Vrelt said. They can learn, adapt, and communicate with pack members. But they are still animals. Dangerous animals. The workers finished securing the container and began the transfer process. They activated the lab's containment field first, creating a barrier of energy around a large reinforced cage in the center of the room. Then slowly they opened the transport container. The creature that emerged made even the alien students pull back slightly. The Rathcore was huge. Even on all fours, it stood 8 feet tall. Its body was covered in midnight black scales that seemed to shimmer like oil in the lab lights. 6 eyes arranged in 2 rows across its wide head turned and scanned the room with sharp intelligence. Its limbs were thick with muscle, ending in paws that had retractable claws the size of daggers. When it opened its mouth, Daeho counted rows of serrated teeth designed to tear through flesh and bone. But what struck Daeho most was not its size or weapons. It was the way it moved. The Rathcore was not wild with rage or confusion. It walked calmly into the cage, its 6 eyes taking in every detail of its new prison. It was analyzing, learning. The workers sealed the cage and activated the energy barriers. The Rathcore tested them immediately, pushing against the invisible wall with one massive paw. The barrier held. The creature pulled back and tried a different spot. Then another. It was mapping the cage's dimensions, testing for weaknesses. Note the specimen's behavior, Professor Vrelt said. This is typical predator intelligence. It assesses its environment for escape routes and potential prey. Over the next few days, you will study its hunting patterns, threat displays, and psychological responses to various stimuli. Will we interact with it directly? One student asked. In controlled conditions, yes. You will learn to read its body language, understand its vocalizations, and predict its behavior. These skills are essential for any xenobiologist working in the field. The Rathcore stopped testing the barriers and began pacing. Its movements were steady, rhythmic. Back and forth, back and forth. Its 6 eyes never stopped moving, watching everything. Daeho noticed something odd. Every few passes, the Rathcore's gaze would linger on the observation deck. On them. Is it looking at us? He asked quietly. They have excellent vision, Myung said. It can probably see us clearly through the glass. Taemin was leaning forward, his expression thoughtful. Look at its pattern. It is not pacing randomly. It is testing the barrier at different points each time. See, it hit that spot twice already. It is checking if the field strength varies. You think it is trying to find a weak point? Daeho asked. I think it is too smart to be here, Taemin said quietly. Professor Vrelt dismissed the class after another hour of observation. The students filed out, talking excitedly about the Rathcore. Kes was already bragging about how his people hunted similar creatures on his homeworld. Other students discussed the upcoming practical exam with a mixture of excitement and confidence. Only the humans were quiet. They stayed behind after the others left, watching the Rathcore from the observation deck. The creature had stopped pacing and now sat in the center of its cage perfectly still, but its eyes never stopped moving. There is something wrong here, Myung said finally. What do you mean? Daeho asked. Think about it. Professor Vrelt said Rathcores are pack hunters. They have complex social structures. They form bonds with their pack members. She pointed at the creature below. That Rathcore is alone, completely isolated. How long do you think it has been in that container? The transport came from Gorath 7, Taemin said. That is 3 weeks of travel through slip space. 3 weeks alone in a dark container. Daeho felt sick. Is that legal? Legal? Myung laughed bitterly. It is an animal from a death world. Most coalition species do not think about animal welfare the way humans do. To them, it is just a specimen, a tool for teaching. They watched in silence for a while longer. The Rathcore's sides were heaving slightly, and Daeho realized it was breathing hard. Not from exertion, from stress. We should go, Taemin said. There is nothing we can do, but Daeho could not look away. There was something about the creature that bothered him. It was not acting like a mindless predator. It was acting like something trapped and scared. The other two eventually left, but Deho remained. The observation deck lights dimmed automatically as evening station time approached. Down below, the lab lights also dimmed, leaving only emergency lighting around the cage. In the low light, the Rathcore looked almost like a shadow. Its black scales absorbed what little light remained. Only its 6 eyes reflected the glow of the energy barriers, appearing as small points of green light in the darkness. Daiho stood up to leave. He had stayed too long already, and his stomach reminded him he had not eaten dinner. But as he moved toward the exit, something made him stop. A sound. It came from the lab below. A vocalization from the Rathcore. Not a growl or roar. Something else. Something that made the hair on Deho's arms stand up. It sounded almost like a whimper. He turned back to the observation window. The Rathcore was standing now, facing in his direction. Its 6 eyes were locked on him. In the dim light, Deho could not see its expression clearly, but he could see its body language. The creature's ears were pressed flat against its head. Not in aggression, in submission. In fear, the Rathcore made the sound again, louder this time. A soft keening noise that no apex predator should make, and then it did something that made Deho's breath catch in his throat. It sat, just like a dog would sit. The massive, deadly predator from a death world sat and stared at Deho with all 6 eyes, and made that whimpering sound again. Deho's hands pressed against the observation window. His mind raced. He had seen this behavior before. Not in predators. In rescue animals back on Earth. In creatures that had been abused or trapped for too long. In animals that were begging for help. "You are scared," he whispered, even though he knew the Rathcore could not hear him through the soundproof glass. The creature's mouth opened slightly, not in a snarl, in something that looked almost like panting. Its body trembled, just barely visible in the dim light. And Deho realized something that made his stomach turn. The Rathcore was not testing the cage to escape and hunt. It was testing the cage to escape and run away. The apex predator from Gorath 7 was terrified. But terrified of what? The cage, the isolation, something else? Deho forced himself to look away from the Rathcore and scan the rest of the lab. It was huge, filled with equipment and workstations. And in the far corners, partially hidden in shadow, he saw other shapes. Other cages, he counted quickly. 5 cages total. The Rathcore's cage was in the center, but there were others arranged around the edges of the lab. They were covered with heavy tarps, concealing whatever was inside. Why would they cover the other specimens? The Rathcore made its whimpering sound again, and this time Deho heard something else beneath it. A pattern, 3 short sounds, a pause, 1 long sound, a pause, 3 short sounds again. His blood ran cold. He knew that pattern. Every human knew that pattern, Soas. It was impossible. There was no way a creature from Gorath 7 could know Morse code. No way it could understand human distress signals. But the pattern was clear, repeating over and over. The Rathcore was not just scared. It was calling for help. Deho stepped back from the window, his heart pounding. He needed to tell someone, Myung, Taemin, anyone who would listen. But tell them what? That an alien predator was using human distress signals? They would think he was crazy. Deho could not sleep. He lay in his small quarters staring at the ceiling, watching the soft pulse of the station's night lighting. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those 6 green eyes staring at him from the darkness. He heard that whimpering sound. 3 short, 1 long, 3 short. At 3 in the morning station time, he gave up trying to rest. He sat at his desk and pulled up every file he could find about Gorath 7 and its native species. The galactic database was massive, with thousands of years of accumulated knowledge from coalition exploration teams. Rathcores were indeed apex predators, just as Professor Vrelt had said. They hunted in family groups with complex hierarchies and communication systems. They were protective of their young and showed signs of mourning behavior when pack members died. Some researchers believed they were more intelligent than the coalition gave them credit for, possibly approaching dolphin or elephant-level intelligence rather than just canine. There were videos of Rathcores in their natural habitat. Deho watched them with growing unease. In the wild, they moved with confidence and grace. They played with their young. They communicated with a variety of sounds, from deep rumbles to high-pitched chirps. They worked together to bring down prey that was sometimes twice their size. The creature in the lab looked nothing like these wild Rathcores. It moved like something broken, something that had forgotten how to be what it was meant to be. Daeho found a section about Wrathcore vocalizations and nearly dropped his datapad. According to the research, Wrathcores could mimic sounds they heard frequently. It was a hunting adaptation, allowing them to lure prey or confuse competitors. If a Wrathcore heard a pattern often enough, it could reproduce it almost perfectly, which meant the creature in the lab had heard SOS before, repeatedly, from someone who knew the signal. From someone human. He needed to tell someone, but who? Professor Vrelt would dismiss him. The station authorities would think he was making things up. He needed evidence. He needed to understand what was really happening in that lab. At breakfast, he found Myung and Taemin at their usual table. They both looked tired. "You look terrible," Myung said as he sat down. "Did not sleep. I need to show you something." He pulled out his datapad and showed them the videos of wild Wrathcores, then explained what he had learned about their mimicry abilities. Taemin listened carefully, his military training showing in the way he analyzed the information. "So you think someone human was in contact with that Wrathcore before it came here?" Taemin said quietly. "Or it heard the distress signal during transport," Myung suggested. "If there was an emergency, if someone was trapped or injured near its container. Either way, it learned that signal means help. It learned to associate it with rescue." Daeho leaned forward. "And it is using it now, which means it thinks we can help it." "Help it do what?" Taemin asked. "Escape? Go back to Gorth 7? That is not going to happen. I do not know. But something in that lab terrifies it. Did you see those other cages? The covered ones?" Myung and Taemin exchanged glances. "We noticed," Myung said. "We were not supposed to. Professor Vrelt has not mentioned them." Their conversation was interrupted by Kess, who stopped at their table with two of his friends. His scales were bright yellow today, a color that indicated amusement. "I heard you humans talking about the Wrathcore. Are you scared of it?" "We are being cautious," Myung said calmly. "Cautious," Kess repeated, and his friends made clicking sounds that might have been laughter. "It is in a cage. It cannot hurt you, unless you are too weak to handle even a caged predator." "We are not weak," Taemin said, his voice hard. "Of course not," Kess said, not bothering to hide his sarcasm. "You humans are very brave. That is why you need weapons and tools to hunt. That is why you come from a world with no real dangers." Very brave indeed. He walked away, his friends following. Daeho felt his face burning with anger, but Myung put a hand on his arm. "Ignore him. He is trying to get under your skin. He is succeeding. Then do not let him. Save your energy for the practical exam tomorrow." Tomorrow. The word hung over them like a weight. Tomorrow they would have to prove themselves in front of the entire class. Tomorrow they would face the Wrathcore up close. After breakfast they had a free period. Most students used it to study or relax, but Daeho had other plans. "I am going back to the lab." "Why?" Myung asked. "I need to see it again. Something does not add up." "I will come with you," Taemin said immediately. "If you are going to do something stupid, you should not do it alone." Myung sighed. "Fine, I am coming too. Someone needs to keep you both from getting expelled." They made their way to the xenobiology section. The corridors were quiet during this time, with most students in their scheduled classes. They reached the observation deck without seeing anyone. Below, the Wrathcore was pacing again, back and forth, testing the barriers at regular intervals. But when Daeho approached the window, the creature stopped immediately. All six eyes locked onto him. "It recognizes you," Myung said, surprised. The Wrathcore sat just as it had the night before, its ears pressed flat, its mouth slightly open. It made that whimpering sound, and even through the soundproof glass they could hear it faintly. "3 short, 1 long, 3 short," Taemin said, his face pale. "That is SOS. You were right." They watched as the Wrathcore repeated the pattern over and over. It never looked away from Daeho. It was focused entirely on him with an intensity that was almost painful to witness. "Why you?" Myung asked quietly. "Why does it keep looking at you specifically?" Daeho shook his head. "I do not know. Maybe because I was the last one in the observation deck yesterday. Maybe because I stayed and watched when everyone else left. Or maybe," Taemin said slowly, "because you are the only one who looked at it and saw something besides a monster." The Wrathcore stood and walked closer to the edge of its cage, as close to their position as the barriers would allow. It sat again, this time placing one massive paw against the energy field. The barrier sparked where it touched, but the creature did not pull back. It kept its paw there, enduring the discomfort, staring up at them. It is trying to communicate, Myung breathed. That is not animal behavior. That is intelligent communication. Daeho's throat felt tight. He pressed his hand against the observation window, even though he knew the Wrathcore could not touch it. I see you, he whispered. I know you are scared. The creature's mouth opened wider, showing all those terrible teeth. But it was not a threat display. Daeho realized with shock that it looked almost like a smile. Like relief, Daeho, Taemin said urgently. Look at the other cages. Daeho tore his gaze away from the Wrathcore and looked at the covered cages around the edges of the lab. In the better lighting of day, he could see that the tarps moved slightly, as if something beneath them was breathing. Or shifting. How many specimens does Vrelt have? Myung asked. He only mentioned the Wrathcore in class, Daeho said. Then what are those? Before they could discuss it further, they heard voices approaching. Quickly, they moved away from the observation window and pretended to be studying a display panel on the wall. Professor Vrelt entered the observation deck with two other instructors Daeho did not recognize. The three humans tried to look casual, like students who just happened to be there. Vrelt's compound eyes fixed on them. What are you doing here? Studying, Professor, Myung said smoothly. We wanted to observe the Wrathcore before tomorrow's exam. To better prepare ourselves, Vrelt seemed to consider this. Very well, but do not touch any controls. This area is restricted except during scheduled class times. Yes, Professor, they said in unison. Vrelt and the other instructors went to a different panel and began discussing something in low voices. The humans could not hear clearly, but they caught fragments. Tomorrow's sequence. Final test. Proper safety distance. The Shrike. Daeho's blood went cold. Shrike. He knew that word. Everyone in the coalition knew it. Shrikes were nightmare creatures, ancient weapons from a civilization that had destroyed itself. They were kept locked away in maximum security facilities, studied only by the most experienced xenobiologists, and Professor Vrelt had one in the lab. The three humans exchanged terrified glances. Myung mouthed the words, "We need to leave," and they moved toward the exit as quietly as possible. As they passed the observation window, Daeho glanced down one more time. The Wrathcore was standing at the front of its cage, watching the professors. All six of its eyes were wide with what looked like panic. Its body was trembling and it was making a new sound. Not the SOS pattern, something different. A low, constant growl that sounded almost like a warning. They made it out of the observation deck and did not stop moving until they were 3 corridors away. Then they ducked into an empty study room and locked the door. A Shrike, Taemin said, pacing. Vrelt has a Shrike in that lab. Is he insane? He said it was for the final test, Myung said. That means we will have to face it tomorrow. All of us. We cannot, Daeho said. Shrikes are designed to kill coalition species. That is their entire purpose. We are not trained for this. The other students will be fine, Myung said bitterly. They have natural defenses. Armor, speed, strength, but us? We are soft targets. They sat in silence, the weight of tomorrow pressing down on them. Daeho could not stop thinking about the covered cages, all through dinner, through his evening study session, through another sleepless night. By the time station time reached midnight, he had made a decision that he knew was probably stupid but felt absolutely necessary. He was going back to the lab, alone. He dressed in dark clothes and checked the corridor outside his quarters. Empty. Most students were asleep, and the night shift station crew worked in different sections. He moved quietly through the corridors, using the routes he had memorized over the past few days. The xenobiology section was locked, but his student access card still worked. The door slid open with barely a whisper and he slipped inside. The observation deck was dark, lit only by emergency lighting that cast everything in shades of blue and gray. Below, the lab was equally dim. He could see the Wrathcore's cage in the center, and the dark shapes of the covered cages around it. The creature itself was lying down, its sides rising and falling with slow breaths. Sleeping, maybe? Or trying to. Daeho found the stairs that led down to the lab floor. They were marked with warning signs about authorized personnel only, but he ignored them. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears, but he kept moving. The lab floor was massive up close. Equipment hummed quietly in the darkness. Monitoring systems blinked with status lights, and the cages loomed like dark monuments in the dim light. He approached the Wrathcore's cage first. The creature's eyes opened immediately, all 6 of them reflecting the emergency lights. It stood up slowly, watching him. For a moment, Deho froze, suddenly very aware that only an energy barrier stood between him and an apex predator. But the Wrathcore did not attack the barrier. It walked to the edge of its cage closest to Deho and sat. Then it made a soft rumbling sound, almost like a cat's purr if a cat weighed 800 pounds. "I know," Deho whispered. "I know you are scared. I am trying to understand why." The Wrathcore's ears perked up at his voice. It tilted its massive head, watching him with clear intelligence. Then it did something unexpected. It turned its head and looked toward the covered cages, then back at Deho, then at the cages again. "You want me to look at them," Deho said. The Wrathcore made a soft chirping sound. Agreement, maybe. Encouragement. Deho moved toward the nearest covered cage. His hand shook as he reached for the tarp. This was beyond stupid. This was potentially deadly. But he had come this far. He pulled the tarp back. Inside was a creature that looked like it was made of living crystal. It was roughly the size of a large dog, with multiple faceted surfaces that caught and reflected the emergency lights. Beautiful in a strange way, but also clearly distressed. Its surfaces were pulsing rapidly with different colors, and it was pressed against the far corner of its cage, as far from the center of the room as it could get. Deho checked the species label. Growlix from the planet Shimmer. Predators that could sense electromagnetic fields and use them to hunt. Dangerous, but not nearly as dangerous as a Wrathcore. He moved to the second covered cage and pulled back the tarp. This one contained something that looked like a mass of dark tentacles suspended in a specialized atmosphere. The tentacles moved slowly, almost hypnotically. The label said Vrellan Stalker from Mistdeep Station. Another predator, another Death World species. But like the crystal creature, it was huddled away from the center of the room. The third cage made Deho's breath catch. Inside was a Varakian stalker, one of the most feared predators in Coalition space. It was roughly humanoid in shape, but covered in adaptive camouflage that flickered and changed constantly. Its natural hunting method involved becoming nearly invisible and using neurotoxic venom to paralyze prey. This creature had killed trained Coalition soldiers. Deho had read about a colony that was evacuated after just 3 of these things got loose. They were nightmare fuel given physical form, and it was terrified. The stalker's camouflage was cycling rapidly through colors and patterns, a sign of extreme stress. It was pressed into the corner of its cage, its body language screaming fear, and it was facing away from something. Deho looked at the last cage, the one in the very center of the room, the one that all the other predators were oriented away from. He approached it slowly. This tarp was heavier, thicker, with warning symbols he did not recognize printed on its surface. His hand touched the edge of the fabric. Behind him, the Wrathcore made a sound. Not the SOS pattern, not a whimper. A low, urgent warning growl. Deho pulled the tarp back anyway. The cage was smaller than the others, only about 6 feet on each side. The lighting inside was different, designed for a specific species vision. And in that light, Deho saw something that made every instinct in his body scream at him to run. A shrike. It was smaller than he expected, maybe the size of a large human. But size meant nothing with shrikes. They were designed to kill, built by an ancient civilization that had been too good at creating weapons. This one had a sleek black body that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Multiple limbs ending in blades that looked like they could cut through steel. A head that was all sensors and predatory calculation, and it was watching him. Deho stumbled backward, his heart racing. The shrike did not move, but its head tracked him with perfect precision. Even in the cage, even behind barriers, it radiated menace. Now he understood why all the other predators were terrified. A Wrathcore was an apex predator on its homeworld. A Varakian stalker was a nightmare that haunted Coalition Marines. But a shrike was something else entirely. It was a weapon given life, designed by a species that understood fear and death and had weaponized both. The shrike's head tilted slightly, and Deho heard a sound. Clicking, processing. It was analyzing him, learning him, cataloging his weaknesses. Even through the barriers, even separated by reinforced containment fields, it was hunting him. Deho forced himself to look away and move back toward the Wrathcore's cage. The creature was standing now, watching him closely. When their eyes met, the Wrathcore made that rumbling sound again. This time, Deho understood it. Sympathy. The creature was expressing sympathy for him, because it knew what it was like to be in a cage with that thing nearby, to feel its predatory focus, to understand on a deep instinctual level that you were facing something that could kill you and there was nothing you could do to stop it. "They are going to make us face it tomorrow," Deho said quietly. "All of us." The students, the Wrathcore's ears pressed flat. It made a soft keening sound. Not fear for itself, fear for him. Deho sat down on the floor, his legs suddenly too weak to hold him. He was several feet from the Wrathcore's cage, but the creature moved as close as it could get and sat facing him. Two different species from two different worlds sharing a moment of understanding. "I do not know how to survive this," Deho said. He knew the Wrathcore could not understand his words, but he needed to say them anyway. "The other students, they have armor, weapons built into their bodies. What do I have? Soft skin, no claws, no venom. Just a brain that right now is telling me to run and never come back." The Wrathcore rumbled again, then it did something that made Deho's throat tight. It placed one massive paw against the barrier. The same gesture it had made from the observation deck. Connection, solidarity. "You are telling me not to give up," Deho said. The Wrathcore's 6 eyes blinked slowly. Then it turned its head and looked at the Shrike's cage. When it looked back at Deho, its expression was different. Not fear, determination. Deho stood up slowly. He walked closer to the barrier, close enough that he could feel the slight warmth it generated. He placed his hand against it opposite the Wrathcore's paw. The energy field tingled against his skin. "We are both trapped," he said. "You in your cage, me in this situation. But maybe that is okay. Maybe being trapped does not mean being helpless." A sound behind him made him spin around. Footsteps. Someone was coming. Deho ran for the stairs, moving as quietly as he could. He made it to the observation deck just as the lab doors opened below. He pressed himself against the wall in the shadows and watched. Myung stepped into the lab, followed by Taemin. Relief and irritation hit Deho at the same time. He stepped out of the shadows. "What are you doing here?" Both of them jumped, then Myung glared at him. "What are we doing here?" "What are you doing here?" "I checked your room. You were gone. I knew you would do something stupid. I had to see what was in those cages, and," Taemin asked, "it is worse than we thought. Come on." He led them down to the lab floor. The Wrathcore watched their approach with interest. Deho showed them each covered cage, saving the Shrike for last. When Myung saw it, she grabbed Deho's arm hard enough to hurt. "Please tell me that is not real." "It is real, and we have to face it tomorrow." Taemin was staring at the Shrike with the expression of someone who had seen combat and knew exactly how bad this was. "Vrelt has lost his mind. You cannot put students in a room with a Shrike. There are protocols, laws." "He said there would be proper safety distance," Deho said, "but I do not think it matters. That thing is analyzing us right now, learning us. By tomorrow it will know exactly how to kill each of us." They stood in silence, watching the Shrike watch them back. Finally, Myung spoke. "Then we do not give it the chance. We stay calm. We follow protocols exactly. We show no fear." "How?" Deho asked. "That is a Shrike. Fear is the only sane response." Morning came too quickly. Deho, Myung, and Taemin met for breakfast, but none of them could eat much. Around them, the other students buzzed with excitement about the practical exam. They talked about the Wrathcore like it was an interesting puzzle to solve, not a living creature trapped in fear. Kes sat at a nearby table with his friends, his scales bright orange. "I hope they let us interact with it directly," he said loudly. "On my world, we hunt creatures twice that size." "That is because your world has actual predators," Thum said, his gaseous form swirling with amusement inside his suit. "Unlike some planets I could mention." He looked directly at the human table. A few students laughed. Taemin's jaw tightened, but Myung shook her head. "Save it for the exam." They arrived at the xenobiology lab early. Professor Vrelt was already there, along with 2 teaching assistants and several automated safety drones. The other students filed in, taking their seats in the observation deck. The 3 humans sat together in the back row. "Welcome," Professor Vrelt said, his forearms spread wide. "Today you will put your knowledge to practical use. You will face several specimens and demonstrate your ability to assess threat levels, read predatory behavior, and maintain composure under pressure. He activated a holographic display showing different scenarios. Each of you will enter a sealed observation chamber adjacent to the specimen cages. You will have 5 minutes to analyze the creature's behavior while it tests the barrier between you. Your responses will be recorded and graded. "Is this safe, Professor?" one student asked completely. "The barriers have redundant safety systems. No student will be in any actual danger." Daeho caught Myung's eye. They both knew that was not entirely true. The barriers were strong, yes, but they had seen the Shrike. They knew what it was capable of. The first test began with the crystal creature. Students went in one by one, entering the sealed chamber while the Kralix pulsed and shifted colors on the other side of the barrier. Most students passed easily, using their natural resistances to electromagnetic fields or simply ignoring the creature's attempts to intimidate them. When Daeho's turn came, he walked into the chamber with his heart pounding. The Kralix turned its faceted surfaces toward him, and he felt a strange tingling sensation, like static electricity building on his skin. The creature was trying to sense his electromagnetic field, to understand what he was. He remembered what Taemin had said. Humans were unpredictable, so instead of freezing or backing away, he sat down cross-legged on the floor and slowed his breathing, an old meditation technique his grandmother had taught him. His heart rate dropped. His electromagnetic signature changed. The Kralix tilted, confused. It pulsed different colors, trying to provoke a fear response. Daeho remained still and calm. After 5 minutes, the test ended. Professor Vrelt's compound eyes fixed on him as he exited. "Interesting approach," the test continued. Each student faced the tentacled creature next, then others from the covered cages. The alien students handled them with varying degrees of success, but they all had natural advantages. Kes had armored scales that made him impervious to most physical attacks. Thum's gaseous form meant he had no solid body for predators to target. When the humans went through, they had to think differently. Myung used her knowledge of animal behavior to predict movements. Taemin used his military training to assess threats and maintain composure. Daeho relied on patience and the ability to appear calm even when his heart was racing. They passed each test, but just barely. Professor Vrelt made notes after each performance, his expression unreadable. Finally, they reached the Rathkor's test. The creature had been watching from its central cage the entire time, its 6 eyes tracking each student. When the first alien student entered the observation chamber, the Rathkor charged the barrier immediately, testing it with its massive weight. The student jumped back but held their ground. The test continued like that for each student, the Rathkor charging, testing, growling. When Daeho entered the chamber, something different happened. The Rathkor stopped pacing. It looked at him for a long moment, and Daeho saw recognition in those 6 eyes. Then, instead of charging, the creature sat down. The observation deck went silent. Professor Vrelt's voice came through the speaker. "Most unusual. Continue the test, Mr. Daeho." Daeho stood in the chamber, uncertain what to do. The Rathkor was not displaying aggressive behavior. It was not testing the barrier. It was just sitting there watching him with what looked almost like expectation. He made a decision. He walked closer to the barrier, close enough to see the details of the Rathkor's scales, the patterns around its eyes. The creature did not move. Its ears perked forward, alert but not aggressive. Daeho placed his hand against the barrier. The Rathkor lifted one massive paw and placed it opposite his hand, just like it had done in the middle of the night. The barrier sparkled between them. "What are you doing?" Professor Vrelt demanded. "Testing trust," Daeho said quietly, "not just fear." He stood there for the remaining 5 minutes, his hand against the barrier, the Rathkor's paw mirroring his position. When the timer ended and he exited, the entire class was staring at him. Some in confusion, some in what might have been respect, and Professor Vrelt with clear disapproval. "That was not proper protocol," Vrelt said. "With respect, Professor, protocol assumes the creature is only a threat, but Rathkors are pack animals. They understand social bonds. I demonstrated that I understand its nature beyond just its capacity for violence." Vrelt's mandibles clicked in irritation, but he moved on. Myung and Taemin went through the test next, and while the Rathkor did not sit for them, it also did not charge as aggressively as it had for the other students. It tested the barrier, but almost perfunctorily, as if going through expected motions. Then Professor Vrelt made an announcement that sent ice through Deho's veins. For the final test, you will observe our most dangerous specimen. A shrike murmurs ran through the class. Even the alien students looked nervous now. Everyone knew about shrikes. Everyone feared them. You will not enter a chamber with this creature, Vrelt continued. You will observe from a safe distance while it demonstrates its predatory assessment capabilities. Each of you will stand at a designated observation point while the shrike analyzes you through reinforced barriers. You will be graded on your ability to maintain composure. The Rathcore began making sounds, not the SOS pattern, something else, a constant low growling that filled the lab. The other caged creatures also became agitated. The crystal being pulsed rapidly, the tentacled creature thrashed in its containment. Calm the specimens, Vrelt ordered his assistants. They activated sonic dampeners that made the creatures quiet down, but Deho could see they were still terrified. The Rathcore's growling was muted but did not stop. The tarp was removed from the shrike's cage. In the full lighting of the lab, it was even more terrifying than Deho remembered. The creature's black surface seemed to absorb light, making it difficult to look at directly. Its multiple limbs moved with a fluidity that defied natural motion, and its eyeless head turned slowly, scanning the observation deck. The shrike is one of the most efficient predators ever created, Professor Vrelt lectured. It was designed by the Kethran civilization approximately 8,000 years ago as a weapon against coalition species. The Kethrans were destroyed by their own creations when the shrikes achieved independence and turned on their makers. Only a handful of specimens remain, kept under maximum security for research purposes. Is it safe to have one here? Thum asked, his form swirling with clear anxiety. Completely safe. This specimen is smaller than average and has been thoroughly studied. The containment fields are impenetrable. Deho noticed that Vrelt did not mention the military wing breach from a few days ago, did not mention that 3 soldiers had died, did not mention that there had been shrikes loose on the station. The test began. Students filed down to the lab floor one by one, standing at marked positions while the shrike observed them. The creature moved slightly in its cage, its head tracking each student with perfect precision. Its clicking sounds filled the lab, processing, analyzing, learning. Some students tried to look brave. Others could not hide their fear. The shrike seemed to take special interest in the ones who showed fear, moving closer to the edge of its cage when they stood at the observation points. When Kess's turn came, he strutted to his position, his scales bright with false confidence. The shrike turned its head toward him and tilted it slightly. Click, 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 analyzing. Then it made a sound that sent chills down Deho's spine, a hiss that sounded almost like satisfaction. It had found Kess's weakness. Whatever it was, the shrike now knew exactly how to kill him. Kess left his position quickly, his scales turning pale yellow. Fear. He tried to hide it, but everyone had seen. The tests continued. Each student, each analysis, each clicking assessment. The shrike was learning them all, categorizing them, finding their weaknesses. When Thum's turn came, the gaseous being's form flickered with terror. The shrike watched him for barely 30 seconds before making that hissing sound again. Another weakness identified. Then it was Deho's turn. He walked to the marked position, his legs feeling like lead. Every instinct screamed at him to run. The shrike turned its eyeless head toward him,